Hi, this is Alexander Siddig. I used to play Dr. Bashir on Deep Space Nine, and you are listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. 2020 has been a crazy year for me in this podcast. I've had the opportunity to chat with a lot of professionals in a variety of fields whose work I've admired very much, and it's been a wonderful year for me being able to highlight many of these folks who don't typically get the spotlight they deserve. That said, even though the motto of this show is to showcase the people who aren't in the opening credits, I've broken that rule a bit this year. And you know what? I'm going to do it again because rules are made to be broken. If you don't believe me, ask pretty much any Starfleet captain who's broken the Prime Directive again and again and again. Today, we are joined by the man who played Dr. Julian Bashir for all 7 seasons of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Alexander Siddig. He's in a new movie that comes out on December 18th called Skylines, which is the end of the Skyline trilogy of sci-fi films. And in this movie, Alexander plays General Radford, and we're going to spend a bit of time discussing Skylines and what's going on with that series. But of course, this is Trek Untold, so we're going to have plenty of Star Trek Deep Space Nine stories to discuss today, including a few notable episodes and guest stars he worked with, along with some other great stories from different moments in his career, and the usual obscure things that I like to dig up here on Trek Untold from people's pasts. That might sound very ominous, but trust me, it's not. It's going to be a really fun one. You may also remember Siddig's appearances in other shows and films like 24, Game of Thrones, Kingdom of Heaven, Clash of the Titans, 21 Bridges, Merlin, Poirot, and Gotham, to name a few. And I have to tell you guys, I don't think Alexander Siddig has aged a single day from when we last saw him on DS9. I'm pretty positive he's some kind of vampire who just puts flour or something in his hair to make himself look a bit older, but otherwise he looks and sounds almost exactly the same as he did over 25 years ago. Alexander is intelligent, charming, charismatic, and best of all, one of the most down-to-earth and friendly individuals I've had the privilege of speaking to. So get ready for an hour with Dr. Bashir here on Trek Untold, no augmentation needed. Now, before we start this week's episode, I want to ask you, are you following Trek Untold on social media? If you're not yet, please make sure to check out Trek Untold on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, so you can get the latest updates on the guests we're speaking to each week, along with all sorts of other great things we show. If you've been enjoying this show, please consider supporting us by checking out our merchandise on teespring.com/stores/trekuntold, where we've got mugs, t-shirts, cell phone cases, and all sorts of other crazy stuff you can buy to show off how much you love Trek Untold. Or please consider supporting us on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold. We've got a few different benefit tiers that help us out and give you a little something extra each week for the show. If you're a new listener or a regular listener who hasn't done this yet, please, of course, don't forget to subscribe to us whether you're watching us on YouTube or on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any other audio or video platforms you might find this show. And if you've been enjoying Trek Untold, whether it be the audio version or the video version, please make sure to leave a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you're checking out the show. Or if you're watching it on youtube.com/nerdnewstoday, make sure to leave a comment and give us a thumbs up. Those little tiny things that'll take you a few moments to do will help this show out for light years to come, and ensure that other people are able to find Trek Untold and give it a listen. And if you're a member of this audience who has already done one or several of those things already, thank you so much for your support. And if you haven't had a chance to do any of those things yet, we still thank you very much for choosing to listen today to Trek Untold. There's a ton of other Star Trek podcasts out there, and there's only so many hours in the day, so we really do appreciate you choosing this one to check out for the time we're spending with you now. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our sponsor at Triple Fiction Productions, who makes some amazing 3D printed Star Trek inspired dioramas and props for both Star Trek action figures and Star Trek fans in person. Whether you're a cosplayer or a toy collector, there's plenty of stuff to check out from Triple Fiction Productions, but you're going to hear a little bit more about them later on. So without further ado, let's begin this week's episode. Computer, access interview file. And welcome back to Trek Untold, and now joining us on the opposite side of the screen, Trekkies know him best as Dr. Bashir from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We know him today as Alexander Siddig, because that's his real name. Alexander, how's it going today?
Very good. Thank you for asking. Not bad at all. How about yourself?
I'm doing, I think, a little better than you are today, because you've been doing media calls for all day today, so I know you're tired.
Back to back. Yeah, media calls all day, back to back. But it's fine. It's for a good cause.
It is, yeah, because we're going to talk first about a new film you're in that's called Skylines. This is the finale of the trilogy in the Skyline series. It started back in 2010. We're wrapping up here in 2020. Did you know much actually about Skylines before you took this role?
Nothing, not a thing, not a Scooby. Didn't have a clue about what was going on. For those who don't know what not a Scooby is, it's not a Scooby Doo. It was a very interesting project to get through the mail. My agent sent it to me and said that they'd love to consider me for this role, and I read it, and I was like, "Whoa, I haven't read a script like that for a long time." And I've never been in a movie like this, so that really appealed to me because those sort of movies aren't getting made anymore. Very, very rarely. They used to be made quite a lot in the 70s and the 80s.
I'd say there's definitely some perfect casting here because you play General Radford. He's this charismatic. It's pretty much the part made for you, to be honest. I can't really think of anyone else that could do this part as well. And of
Thank
course,
you.
you always look good in the uniform. But can you tell us a bit about General
Love a
Radford?
uniform.
Can you tell us a bit about who General Radford is?
He's basically the head of the resistance on Earth, and through one thing and another, an invasion, and then a pandemic. There's a bunch of aliens who are getting really ill. They have been, I guess, domesticated is the best word I can think of, but they're about to revert, and because of this disease. And if they revert, they far outnumber the humans, and they'll be in a lot of trouble. So they've got to find a way to turn the clock back and stop them reverting. And basically, General Radford, who is patriarchal figure, your standard general, who has responsibility, he feels political responsibility over everything on the planet. And he gets the team together of crack troops to go to the alien planet called Cobalt Blue, which is too far away to travel to in any normal way, but they've figured out through a wormhole that they can get there in record time. And the only person he needs for his crew is this one woman who is, I would say, a half biracial, alien and human, called Rose, who played pretty amazingly, I have to say, by Lindsay Morgan. So eventually he manages to persuade her, and then everything kicks off.
And that's where the movie truly begins. And you mentioned Lindsay Morgan. She's a very underrated actress. She's really coming to her own, especially in Skylines. What do you think about the time that you spent with her?
I was really impressed. Not she's a lovely person, but everyone's a lovely person. You expect them to be a lovely person. What she did that's really difficult to do, and I don't think I've seen it very often, certainly not in a movie, is to play an action hero from as a woman, from a female action hero. Often it's like fudge, a square peg into a round hole, trying to be too masculine, trying to do something that the gender doesn't, your gender conflicting, basically. Now that's not to get into a whole gender political argument, which is minefield. But although I'm incredibly sympathetic to that argument, I just don't have the ammunition to really come on one side or the other. But I do think that Lindsay can be a steel bitch and this absolutely charming person at the same time, which, Tomb Raider didn't make it. It was always, the imbalance was not there, but the balance is perfect. She is utterly credible as someone who would whoop your ass if you got into trouble with her. And that's partly because she's an athlete and she does act brilliantly. So that does the charm side of it. So she's got it all.
There's definitely some hints of Major Kira in there as well, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Major Kira, yeah, absolutely.
So I gotta say, I watched the movie, I got to see an advanced copy of it, and the visual effects are stunning in this. I was really, really into those.
Yeah.
What was your reaction first time you ever saw those aliens?
Amazing. I mean, I saw them in real life because they didn't have the budget to just do the complete CGI rendering for all of those. So those guys were wearing that stuff on stage, 8 foot tall and wearing stilts with stuntmen inside, very hot. It was pretty amazing. They were awesome. The right use of the word, and it's been a really interesting learning curve, working out how to work with them without doing too much of this, which camera doesn't really understand. And it was really cool. I mean, the whole thing, the whole movie was interesting in the sense that it had physical sets. So you're not working with tennis balls and pieces of ribbon, which is what most people are working with in Avatar or some movie like that. That's all just totally not there. But Liam, the director, insisted on real sets and had a real feel to everything. Not only because it's a low budget film by most standards, this is it's the third release of a franchise. It would be unthinkable, unless it was a huge budget. But he's done it with a low budget. And he's got enough people who really devotees of the film to go, well, we'd like to see another one, please. And I hope he gets to do lots more with lots more great actors. And this physicality was really important for the way we worked on set, kept the spirit jovial. Because when you're working with nothing, it's just dispiriting after a while. You're just constantly imagining. The only imagining we had to do was certain tentacles and things that grabbed us, which was really actually incredibly hard. To be grabbed by a non-existent tentacle and look like you're being grabbed by it was a challenge.
Yeah, I love that there's a combination of the visual effects and actual practical effects here. It's almost seamless too, and to say that this is low budget really just doesn't do it justice, because it's really, they know how to use this budget so effectively. It's for what it is and how much it costs to make this thing. It looks like $1 million.
Yeah, well, the secret to great filmmaking is to work with low budget, to work well with low budgets. Look at Jaws. I mean, even the first Star Wars, these things weren't made for big bucks. The budgets escalated thereafter. But you can make really cracking cinema. But also, the important thing is the budgetary constraints challenge everybody to come up with more creative solutions for things. So that means a script that has a really interesting genre perspective. In this case, it's a very mashed up genre situation. It's reminiscent of the deeply satirical movies of the 70s, and not since then have these sort of movies being made. Roger Corman, fiddled around with this stuff. Neil Marshall does bits, some of this stuff, but not so heavily reliant on the satire. So Liam's done a major work by incorporating the finest elements, the really interesting elements of good sci-fi, which is to be satirical, to actually talk about things that are happening today, and to deliver it in an entertaining way that makes you laugh or cry or whatever it is you want to do in the situation. And that's a pretty difficult thing to pull off. And I was really, really impressed when I saw it Friday. I only saw it a couple of days ago.
Yeah, that's a really excellent way that you put it. It really is a throwback, but with a very, very modern twist. So that's really cool. That's something I did enjoy about it. Now I'm picking up on it now that you mentioned it. And it's funny, we talked about at the start of this interview how a big plot point to this movie is that there's a pandemic going on that's affecting these alien characters. And this was done before COVID-19 was even a thing. So it's kind of funny now that anytime there's any sort of virus, we're just going to say it's current events. In this case, though, it seems like it just kind of worked out into being current events.
It was just purely circumstantial. There was a coincidence that we couldn't possibly have foreseen back in March last year when we were actually shooting it. It just was something that, there's a pandemic. That's interesting. Cool. That's very sci-fi. Little did I know that it would become kind of gritty reality TV by a year later.
So yeah, I think all Star Trek fans are going to really enjoy this. I think you'll agree with me on that too. I mean, it's got a wormhole, so I'm already hooked.
Yeah, it's, what, I think they'll like it because they need it. We need it right now. We need to just go, I'm checking out. I'm going to watch a movie. I'm going to let someone else do all the heavy lifting for the next couple hours, an hour and a half, which is what we need, coming home from work, or you've been on shift as a nurse, or whatever your situation is right now. You can just unravel, and it's not going to be too offensive, and it's not going to really mess up your day politically. And it talks about issues if you're interested, and if you're not, you can stay above it. And at the same time, there's a point, once you've invested, like all of these sort of movies, in the first 20 minutes and gone, right, okay, I understand what you mean. This is the world we're living in, and this is what happened in the last movies if I haven't seen them. And we're here. Now show me, and they push a button, it'll show you, and it just goes boom. And it's like, whoa. And that's great fun. It's got the elements of aliens. I mean, lots of different things in there. But the thing I like most about it is the sense of humor.
Yeah, Skylines is a lot of fun. And we're going to have links to that in the show notes for this week's episode because it's coming out tomorrow, or depending when you listen to it, it's probably already out. So yeah, make sure you
Could
guys
be
check out
out.
Skylines. We'll talk more about it in a little bit. But Alexander, yeah, I want to talk to you about a few Trek things today as well. But before we jump into that, I was taking a peek through your resume because that's what I like to do here. I like to kind of dig in the past.
Sure.
And I found one film that you worked on very early in your career that sounded very interesting. And that's Sammy and Rosie Get Laid. And I think that was your first film. And it's hard to find much on it, unfortunately, these days. But it sounds like really interesting. It dealt with interracial relationships, sexuality, culture clashes. Yeah, it seems like a real interesting film. What did you do?
It was I was at acting school, and my mum knew I wanted to be an actor, and I think it was through her because she was working in a theater, and she said, well, if you want to act, get in, go and act. And I was like, okay, but I'm at acting school, like, I'm not allowed to act, but apparently I could do this one thing, and that was be an extra for 2 days in a party in a movie. I can't remember his name right now, but he wrote My Beautiful Laundrette, and I think that was one of his follow-up films, Sammy and Rosie Get Laid. And it had Claire Bloom, who is a famous actress from back in the day in England, and one of the Kapoor brothers, an Indian, wonderful, who was in a movie called Shakespeare Waller, which, if you haven't seen it, is absolutely beautiful, with Felicity Kendall. And I was like kind of starstruck by this huge Bollywood star who was there.
That's Shashi Kapoor, by the way, for anybody who wants to check him out. Shashi Kapoor, very, very legendary, more so overseas than here in America.
Absolutely. And so with these guys in it, I was just eating up anything I could because I was a wannabe actor. So I just sat at the breakfast table, and everyone was very friendly. And Kapoor was like trying to give me advice about women, even though I had absolutely no idea how to do what he did, because I didn't have any of the charm that he had. And I was like, okay, cool. It was great fun. It was really good. It was a 2-day stint. It was as an extra, which normally I wouldn't advise anyone who wants to be an actor to do, because it's a lane that you can't get out of very easily. Once you're an extra, you kind of end up staying an extra. And if you want to cross the ropes, you have to do all sorts of cartwheels, and you need a lot of luck. And you already need a lot of luck to be an actor. So that was a fascinating 2 days of my life, put it that way. But I was really at school.
Now, Roland Gift is also in this film. He's from Fine Young Cannibals, lead singer in that group. Were you there the day he was there as well, or one of the days he was there?
Yeah, it was a party where he was there. I mean, and he was like a huge star too. It was, Fine Young Cannibals. God, that really takes me back. I absolutely remember that. What an amazing voice he had. I didn't see the film, to be honest with you. It was probably a little bit. It was a slightly unusual film. It's one of those unusual films that I didn't get to see it. That just didn't come around for me.
Well, I'm glad you remembered it because it drove me crazy. And Fine Young Cannibals reference, you know the rest. So I also wanted to ask about 21 Bridges, because you were in that recently as well. I know you didn't share any scenes with Chadwick Boseman, but I'm wondering if you had any memories of him at all from your time on that movie.
Poor old Chadwick. He came and introduced himself, which was a pretty decent thing for him to do. Hollywood stars are often very gracious, and he is no different. Was no different, sadly. But he had a big entourage. And I was sitting there, I don't know where I was, on a chair outside a hallway in a scene that we were shooting that was so difficult for me, so bloody, literally. I had prosthetic on because I'd shot myself. Someone had shot me in the eye through a peephole in a door. I don't recommend it as a real thing. And I don't recommend it as an acting thing. It's very uncomfortable for a long time because you've got this wet goo on you for hours, and they keep replenishing it because it dries up. So as soon as your blood starts to dry up, they go, oh my God, your blood's drying up. Here's some more. And it's just going into your underpants. And so I was sitting there on the chair, like looking like death warmed up. And this big entourage came in, this group of people. There was security people, and there was makeup fluttering around, and hair people. And it was Chadwick Boseman. And I'd seen him, in the Black Panther, but I hadn't seen any of his other work, but I was just amazed by him in a Black Panther, and I loved everything it stood for. And he just broke away from his group and came up and said, hey, just want to say hi. Really nice work you've done over the years. And I was like, that's very sweet. He's like, well, have a good day. And he went. That was basically my experience of Chadwick Boseman until I heard, like just with everybody else a couple of months ago, that he sadly passed away, and he must have been ill then. I just didn't know, because you don't, that kind of disease doesn't arrive and immediately kill you. You're fighting it for a year or so. I know my mom fought it for several years, so he must have known for quite a while. So it's very courageous to keep going and keep trying to make something happen, trying to encourage people to expand their horizons about the kind of people they're willing to accept.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Chadwick left us all just so many great gifts with his acting, and just how much he kept going through time. That must have been so difficult to even do anything. So
yeah,
I'm glad you got to meet him.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to meet him too.
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hello, everyone. I'm Armin Shimmerman. Perhaps you know me better as Quark from Deep Space Nine. As your favorite Ferengi, I'm here to promote a sale. It's not self-sealing stem bolts, but my new novel, Illyria. And the first book is called The Betrayal of Angels. Some of you may not know that aside from being an actor, I'm also a novelist. My newest novel is a mystery set in 1583. Its heroes are the historical characters of John Dee, who was a spiritualist, a book collector, and a spy. With him is an unsuccessful playwright named William Shakespeare. Their mission is to investigate a nobleman who happens to be Count Orsino from Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. The book employs comedy, history, and fantasy to tell a page-turner of a story. It reads a lot like Sherlock Holmes, or like one of my favorite shows, Homeland. Please check out my website at www.arminshimmerman, get the name right, .com, or you can get it directly from my publisher at www.jumpmasterpress.com. You can buy it either as a paperback, a hardback, or an ebook. So why don't you check it out and judge for yourself? Or better yet, give it as a gift to someone. I know they'll appreciate it. Disclaimer, no latinum accepted.
We now return to Trek Untold.
On a slightly lighter note, let's go ahead and jump into some Star Trek talk, because I know that's what a lot of our folks here today want to hear about. And
bring it on.
All right, let's do this. So I'd like to ask you the first question I ask all of my guests on Trek Untold, and that's, what's your earliest memory of Star Trek?
My earliest memory of Star Trek will have been of Uhuru turning in her chair and a funny noise happening, or something, and her putting her finger to her ear and saying something to Captain Kirk. I don't remember the actual text, but I remember that vision from the original series, because I would have been alone in my apartment, my mum's apartment, while my mum was at work, because I used to let myself in from school from a key hanging on a piece of string in London, and wait for her to get home, because I got home at 12 and she got home at 4 or whatever time. I would just sit in front of the TV and watch TV all day. And I got Star Trek sometimes, and it was incredibly cool to watch. I just absolutely loved it. We had Doctor Who too, and they were the things that I kind of really enjoyed. Doctor Who was totally different, and Star Trek was somehow kind of shinier and lot more exciting things happening. And that was I was struck by this woman who was on the bridge, because she seemed different to everybody else, even though there were lots of aliens and stuff. She was the one that really, I was like, wow. And it could be that, she looks African, and I probably only recently arrived from Africa myself.
Yeah, it's one of the great things about Star Trek is that it really helped expand a lot of people's horizons and really show people what other folks looked like and that they were, in fact, people. As horrible as it is to say that, it did do a lot to really help expose a lot of folks who otherwise may not even ever seen a person look like that before, up close and personal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of one of my missions, especially with the Muslim Arabic world, is to introduce people to those guys. And I take a lot of roles with those characters over the years. And it's been just a pleasure to say, well, hey, I'll introduce you to one. Check it out. And obviously, you're not going to watch me unless you invite me. So if you invite me into your living room, I will try and please you for the next couple of hours. And more often than not, people are going, well, yeah, okay, maybe not so bad after all, these guys.
Now, you've had some amazing roles in Kingdom of Heaven, in Morale, even 24, actually, where you're playing Arabic characters, but they're not like these horrible, evil stereotypes. Like, you're very much into finding these roles of Arabic characters who are, there's more to them, essentially.
Like everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Like an actual human being. Who knew?
Like all of us, yeah. That's cool, kind of wild. Yeah, so you try and bring human to every character you play. I mean, even General Radford is charming and charismatic, like you say, but he's a human, and there's a human element to him. But even the bad guys I've played over the years, I've tried to just find the humanity in them and give them a sense of ambiguity. So people are like, well, maybe, I might, but oh, no, I can't make friends with him now. But there's that moment before when you go, well, maybe I could. He seems kind of a nice guy. And that's interesting when you go, because that's what we're like, isn't it? We are all really nice until you get to know us. And then there's some element of us that you go, whoa, wow. Normally, if you're in love, you don't find that out until you're dating someone or, deep into a relationship with someone, or have parents you're living with and with teenagers for years. And you just go, well, shoot, I didn't see that side of you before. But we all have both sides to us. And it's a question of whether or not we're willing to accept each other, given the fact that we all have both those sides. And I'm obviously, as I said, a little mission is to introduce people to people they've found difficult to get to understand as being friendly or nice. Sure, they're terrorists, but hey, they're everywhere. There are murderers too. But they're not all terrorists and not all murderers.
It's a little off topic here, but you lived in New York around the time of 9/11, correct?
I did, yeah, absolutely. I happened to be in Vegas, I think, the day before 9/11 at a convention. It probably would have been a Star Trek convention, I'm not sure. But I can't think of many other reasons why I'd be in Vegas. And I flew out on the 10th and landed in England to the news that this was all happening. I must have got to the plane probably landed about 7 a.m. And I probably got to my apartment at about 9 and had out of just tiredness and general fatigue, put the television on about 9:45. And I think that was probably around the time planes were doing terrible things to the World Trade Center. And my son was in New York at the UN, just nearby, because he was at the United Nations school, where he refused to learn French. They spoke French there, but he absolutely refused. It's un-American. He was a kid at whatever age he was, and probably 5. And I suddenly went, maybe it's a chemical attack. And that's when I got scared. And that's when I got on the phone. I mean, it was devastating to watch what was happening, obviously. But as a parent, you just go to the next place. It's like, what could be worse than this? What could be even worse than this? And obviously, the chemical attack was the worst possible scenario for me, that they delivered some frightening virus. And I guess it's a biological attack. But couldn't get through on the phone for a day. I think all the phones were down in the whole world. It was one of the most shocking days. But yes, we were living there. But I was apart and panicked because of the fact that I was hundreds of miles, thousands of miles away.
Yeah, I'm a New Yorker. I live in Queens, in fact, and I was in school when it happened, so I actually could see the smoke coming from my my building, from my 3rd floor, in fact. But yeah, the reason I bring it up is because I'm wondering, we're talking a little bit about your descent, you being Arabic. and these roles you've had. And I'm wondering, was it hard for you to get roles after this happened, especially? You know, like I've spoken with Eric Avari. I'm hoping to speak to Brian George at some point, who you worked with in Dr. Bashir, I presume. And like they were telling me, you know, even then, for the most part, there was like a handful of actors who looked like them who were going up for roles, and they usually weren't that great to begin with. Did you have a hard time finding work?
Not since Ridley Scott gave me a job. And actually, the first one was Vertical Limit, where Martin Campbell gave me a job. But that was before 9/11. But that I played a Pakistani guy in that, but he had a lot of soul. He was a really gentle guy, and I guess Ridley probably saw that or something like it. I don't know where he got. I know I had to audition, so he may have seen the audition and been happy enough with that. But often directors will look at other stuff too, because they don't necessarily trust the audition, just the audition. And it was a really important role in Kingdom of Heaven. Basically, Saladin's right-hand man, General Imad, and he that was the first role that opened doors for me. And it was also very it was just a really lovely guy. Got a chance to, especially after 9/11, when everybody was ready to hate, to pay respects to Saladin as the person who basically invented chivalry. Was a big move for Hollywood to make, especially and Fox Studios were very brave to do that so soon. Yes, I played Ibn Khaldun, I think his name was, in a show called Spooks, which over here was called MI5, I believe, and then 24. So I actually did get work, but it was work basically about Arab themes at the time, because the whole world was scrambling to understand what was going on. How did we suddenly all hate each other so badly? And what could possibly have started all this terrorism? And where did it all begin? And why are we here? So I was one of the lucky ones who got the roles of the non-terrorists. I mean, they may have been terrorists, but they may have been ambiguous. They may have turned, they may have done something else. And that was what I was looking out for. And I think that a lot of people had to play actual terrorists, because there were a ton of those too, you know. And then Homeland came along and they had a ton of terrorists. So I kind of have to avoid those shows. Not the shows are fine, but just those kind of roles. Otherwise, you're not doing anyone any favors. So that was, it all changed, but I didn't have trouble finding work, I have to say. I didn't work a lot, but I did work.
And really, the main reason I want to bring it up is just because we're talking about essentially socio-political topics here, and how Star Trek has kind of always been on these things. You know, and there's a lot of fans who will say, "Oh, Star Trek is never political" or whatever. Clearly, we're not watching the same show here. And on that note of politics and Trek, I'd actually like to ask you about a series of episodes that people are talking a lot about these past 4 years. I'm sure you've probably talked about it before. Past Tense.
Yeah.
And it's still such a topical episode. I don't know when it's going to be not topical, but I look forward to the day when it isn't.
Yeah.
But what do you remember about Past Tense? Those are a pair of very heavy episodes.
Yeah. I mean, I remember it was one of our first back-to-back episodes. We did like a duet. Avery was extremely excited by it, really interested in it. And that was very inspiring, because he was our boss, frankly. And we filmed a lot of it outside, which we don't often do, on the back lot in Paramount. And they, set a lot of trash cans on fire. And I kind of belittling it by saying that, but that's kind of what it did. It was kind of interesting to work in the middle of the night too. We didn't tend to do that. So we broke a lot of norms filming Past Tense, and obviously someone somewhere high up had decided this was important and we had to do it. It was probably Ira. Might have been Michael Pillar at that time. And we shot the hell out of it, and we really enjoyed it. We enjoyed taking off the uniform, weirdly. It was kind of fun to put on some other clothes and do what we thought was a gritty drama. And I think it was, and it was astonishing to be in that position. I'm very proud of it. I didn't have a big role in it, but I really enjoyed playing the ensemble. It was normally Deep Space Nine Star Trek episodes tend to focus on one or two characters, and everybody else turns up for a hello, and then they're gone. And then you get back to that character, whether it's Miles O'Brien and Keiko, or whether it's Bashir and anyone. And that one was much more ensemble. So we really did all kind of have to be there and be together. And that was pretty special. Not since the pilot did we have that sense of communal, we're going to carry this show together, guys, and get this over the line. So I really enjoyed that. And of course, the subject matter. You know, I was probably in my late 20s, so I was pretty vapid about that, all those subjects. I really didn't know much about it. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I saw homeless guys. Yeah, cool. Yeah, well, it was really useless. And only since I got a bit older and had kids, particularly, that I went, "Whew, this is a problem. We have to deal with it. This is something. This is more than just homelessness, and this is more, you know, and this is about all kinds of things that are actually systemic. The word that everybody hates right now because people use it about race, and it's true, but the fact is, it's systemic. And Star Trek deals with those subjects beautifully because it doesn't present them as a Republican or a Democrat or a face you understand or any of those things. It just takes it away and says, now, without all the clothes of of politics, without the Republican National Committee, our GOP, and without the DNC, these are costumes. We take those away and we put them on another planet, and they're just ideas. Now, do you like us? And that's what sci-fi does. And people go, well, wait a minute. Yeah, that is bad. Even though I've been told it isn't for the last 10 years. But I'm being told by guys I like that it isn't. And when you start taking away those guys and you just see the naked truth for what it is, as presented in a sci-fi, which is subjective, obviously, it's some writer's truth. It's not the universal truth, not physics. But nevertheless, people can change their minds, or at least expand their minds. And that's pretty powerful. And if you can entertain, that's even better. Actually, entertaining is the most important thing. If you can edify, that's even better. I would have to draw the line. If it's not entertaining, I don't want it.
All right, well said, well said. So on a lighter note, let's talk about some Trek that is maybe not so heavy as we've been discussing for the past however long it's been. I got to ask about Move Along Home, and that's one of my favorite episodes. I see the eye roll already. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
so we got some good memories there. It sounds like.
Embarrassing.
You know, I have a hot take about that episode. I actually think it's pretty good. Like, maybe it's not one of the better ones, but it's definitely not the worst episode of Star Trek. I mean, what's your take on that? Let's just start there.
I don't have an opinion on the episode itself because I never saw it, but I do remember dancing this dance for hours, and that was excruciating. If I've got the right episode, we do this dance, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And that was painful. I mean, painful to the point where we felt we couldn't stop cracking up, we couldn't stop laughing, we couldn't get through it. Avery, you know, one of the most dignified, powerful men who's reduced to going ha 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 ha. And it was really, for us in the moment, because there's none of it's not edited. It's just, you know, basically naked acting. Obviously we're clothed, but just naked. It looks silly. And we just had to totally trust the director to go, you know, we'll get it. Don't worry, by the time we finished, it'll look okay. And we're like, this sucks. This dance sucks. Isn't there a better dance we could do? And that is my only memory of filming it, because we were all so embarrassed about it. It's like kids being, you know, forced to perform for their grandparents. It was terrible.
Excellent way of putting it, yeah. And when you guys, I don't know if you remember it, when you guys like first saw the script, were you just like, what the heck is this garbage? Or were you just like, all right, let's see if that gets better maybe when it comes time to shoot? Do you recall any of that?
No, we liked it. I never thought scripts were garbage. All scripts were great. The dance is fine print. You don't know that's going to be that excruciating until you do it. It's like, and they do this dance, and it's fine. It's cool. Okay, that could be fun. But then when you do it, it's like, oh my goodness, it's terrible. No, I loved every script. I mean, I didn't have a judgment like that on any script. I never went, oh, this sucks. That wasn't my job. My job was, I was paid to execute those scripts, and to judge them is someone else's job. And that was usually a script editor or a producer, and then a critic. So my job is always, as an actor choosing a role, I'll decide whether a script sucks or not. But then I don't do it if I don't like it. But I said I'd do Bashir. I said I'd do Deep Space Nine, and you know, in for a penny, in for a pound. You don't look up. You do your job, and you do it to the best of your ability. And you don't question the scripts. You question little bits because you're a prima donna, niggly, whiny little actor, and you go, I would never say this. This is a terrible line. But you never judge the whole script in a negative or positive way. I mean, you can say we did say things were terrific sometimes. But That wasn't our thing. I don't remember anybody who ever did that about any script, because it denigrated to the writers, and we knew how hard they worked. And then you've interviewed them on this show, and you've interviewed people, backroom staff, and how hard they work. So if we're whining about we had all the power, we literally had the power to have someone fired if we decided to. No one, thank God, did that, but that's how much power we had, because we were too valuable to the franchise. But the minute we start saying bad things about the script, morale would just go flat, because all those people making stuff for the sets, making coffee for the cast and crew, making dinner for when we got to dinner time, and including the filmmakers themselves, the technicians, they didn't need to hear any of that rubbish.
So I can't get the image out of my head right now of Avery Brooks doing Al Moraine, Count to Four. You know the whole thing, but
he was ready to strangle someone. I was as far away from his arm's length as I could be, because I was the most likely strangleable candidate in the room.
I'm a big fan of Avery, though. He is my favorite actor in terms of the captains who have been on Star Trek. Like, I love Avery. I've heard from people who've been on the show that very much, he kind of set the tone for the show. Like, he was really the captain of the ship, and everybody kind of went in line with him. Do you remember what kind of environment was with him, and especially when he was directing? I mean, how was he when he was kind of behind the scenes in those roles?
He is a very serious individual, very, I would say professional, but it's not that. It's above professional. It's deeply serious human being, who is incredibly well read, very knowledgeable about especially African American issues, but also Shakespeare. I mean, he teaches at university, or did at Rutgers, I believe, And we had other people who were very similar. So we had René Auberjonois, the late René Auberjonois, and Armin, all of whom were very serious actors. They never fooled around. I mean, if Sirach and myself and Terry, maybe, we were probably pliable. If they had been like the next generation cast, who kind of had a lot of fun all the time, we'd have been a very different show. But Avery set the tone and was like, no, we're here to work, guys. There's no dicking around. We're not playing any practical. We're not wasting time. We've got to get back to our families, and we're here to do this work, and let's go. So it wasn't that he was a killjoy. It just, that was the tone. It was like you go into a factory where the person on, the foreman on the floor is jokey, and everybody's having a giggle, and you get a little bit less work done. But if you're really serious and focused, then you don't. You just get on with it, and you wait to have fun afterwards. And so we had a lot of questions back in the day, because at the conventions, which kind of irked us, because the next generation were such practical jokers. They even came on our set in practical joke. They'd come on and sing stuff behind the psych, and we get questions about, like, so what practical jokes do you do? What's the funny stuff you do? And it was embarrassing after a while, because we're just like, well, we're not funny. We don't do any funny stuff, because the next generation raised the expectation of all these fans to think that we're going to get some juicy stories where someone got ice cream in the face, or, dog poop somewhere else. And that just wasn't us. And Avery set that tone. And the senior actors like René and Avery and Armin, they set that tone.
Avery got to direct, René got to direct, Andy Robinson directed also, and you directed 2 episodes of DS9 as well.
Yeah.
Well, they were directing you, essentially. Did you pick up anything from them that you used on your episodes?
I don't think so, no. But I was far too up my own rear end to be picking up anything from anyone else about directing. I thought I was the best director that ever lived, and David Lean might be able to sit on my lap if he asked politely, but because I'd been a director for many years, and I'd had a theatre company before and stuff like that, and to me directing Deep Space Nine was just swinging a camera around. So I wasn't a good example, but Avery was probably in the top 2 best directors we had on the show, I'd say. The shows he did, Far Beyond the Stars, there's several. I think he was the most trusted actor director, like Jonathan Frakes, the really deep thinking, good director. René was terrific. I don't think he liked the experience very much. Andy was terrific, and I'm not sure yeah, he thoroughly enjoyed the experience. He's actually a very distinguished director now. And there's a lot of it was kind of perk. But I screwed up a show called Profit and Lace so badly. They went, look, you're not doing this again. Because I just did whatever I felt like. I was so arrogant as a 31-year-old, whatever, that I just went, well, you know what? This is supposed to be funny, but I'm going to make it sad. And you don't do that on Star Trek. The writers don't like it when you do that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that episode up, actually. So we just interviewed Armin Shimmerman, and he was telling us about a scene that it was with your episode where it was him and Cecily Adams together, and they said it was like super real, super serious, and then it got cut because they said it was too serious and too real.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, Armin really despised that episode, and quite rightly, but I didn't have any chance. I didn't have any way of. Normally, you get some kind of edit, some form of, but they took that away. So I have absolutely no control over all this footage I'd filmed, which is a problem because, of course, it's going to arrive at the editor's door without context. You're not going to know what I was aiming at, what I was trying to do. I'd done a pretty good episode before that, and I think it was described by at least one executive as one of the best debut episodes he'd seen. I'd had real problems to deal with, and we dealt with it all really well, and we got a good show out at the end of the day. A decent show, put it that way. I wouldn't go so far as to say good. So Profit and Lace was really me exercising what I thought was the director's prerogative, and that is to decide how to interpret a scene and how to let the actors get to where they need to get to. It turns out that any depth, and I was really searching for depth in Armin's character, in Quark, especially with his mother, and the late great Cecily. And if I would, and there was a moment where it could happen. It was a moment of high tension, and it was very slapstick as written. And I thought, well, you can get to a place of slapstick, and if from the opposite direction. You don't have to do it just to be funny. You can do it to expose a tragedy, a tragic relationship between these two people. Things aren't going quite as well as. That was my intent. It was a naive and foolish idea because the writers don't like you making those decisions. And certainly on Deep Space Nine. As an actor for your own role, sure, make that decision. They'll cut it if they want to. But obviously without all of that information, without that geometry, the scene makes no sense. And we had wonderful actor from Laugh-In. I can't remember his name because I'm not American, so it's not a household name for me, but that famous actor from Laugh-In or whatever they call it. And he was there, and he was terrific. And we had Wallace Shawn, and we had this crack squad of Ferengi. And I just wanted to mine a bit more out of it, as opposed to, because I guess I thought that it was just funny all the time, and it seemed to be there were unmined depths of personality, especially relationships with moms, which are complicated, and that needed a go. But I chose the wrong horse, and I shouldn't have done it because they slapped me down.
So somewhere out there is the director's cut version of this episode, which is going to be the dirty one.
They would have burnt that up really quickly. Leave no evidence, no gloves at the scene.
So now, I'm a Star Trek collector of various things. I've got some Eagle Moss Hero Collector ships, but my main thing is really action figures, and you have several from Playmates and from Art Asylum. I'm curious what your thoughts were of your very first action figure.
It was thrilling to have an action figure made, because that seemed like only, supermodels and Barbie got that happen to them. I'm sure Barbie's around going, I've got lots of action figures, wherever real Barbie is. But then I noticed that this one was really white. They color faded me to match the expectations of the audience, which I thought was pretty patronizing. I didn't really need to do that. And then I think they kind of tried to adjust it later. But he was white and muscular, neither of which I am. So I suppose I should be flattered.
Yeah, I can tell you that first wave of DS9 figures, everybody was too pale, including Captain Sisko, or at that point, Commander Sisko. But everybody did get more accurate skin colors a little bit later on. So that at least
they had people come in with Pantone color charts to match up our faces. And then I know someone higher up went, take it down a couple of notches. He's a little too dark.
Do you collect any of your own merchandise that has your face on it?
I got whatever I got free. So they gave me stuff. They usually give us a box every year of whatever's going on. We selected it. They didn't give us everything. They give us dolls, nearly all the action figures. Sorry, terminology. They gave us those, and I got that. And I think they hung in my kitchen for a few years, and that would be kind of a source of amusement for people, especially the young children like my niece and nephew, who are like, "I'm smacking Sid against the kitchen counter." Bang, bang, I'm smacking Sid against the kitchen counter. And they're like, yeah, no, you can do that. So that other than that, I would give everything away because there were all these opportunities to give stuff away and people really liked it. So especially mint bits and pieces with low numbers.
So one of my personal favorite episodes about Dr. Bashir is one of the ones that's actually fairly early on in the series, and that's the one Melora, where you and Daphne Ashbrook are together. A really great episode. I think it's one that kind of very much fleshes out the character of Dr. Bashir and shows more of the human side to this guy. It's all about frontier medicine. Can you tell us a little about working with Daphne Ashbrook?
She was just lovely. I mean, I dated her, we fell in love. And that was because obviously I thought she was terrific. And as a lot of these things go, it didn't last all that long, really long by normal Hollywood standards, which is like, let's get married, let's get divorced tomorrow, which is really puzzling about Hollywood. She's just a really down-to-earth, lovely person. And I just thoroughly enjoyed working with her. It's difficult to put my finger on exactly what the chemistry was. But I really was interested by the episode because it set up a couple of paradoxes that kind of I found fascinating as from a medical point of view in Star Trek, not from a real medical point of view, but that in this supposedly utopian time when we have answers for just about everything, we have a disabled person we couldn't fix. And I know I was having a talk with someone who represents a disabled community the other day, and she said, well, you know what, disability always wins. It doesn't matter how far we get, how many cool gizmos you have to fix someone in a second. Disability will find a way to win this war. Something will always break us, which is very wise and sobering thought, that we aren't at the top of nature's food chain, and probably never will be, even in the far reaches of the 24th century. And that was something I didn't understand when we were filming it, but because I was too busy gazing at Daphne Ashbrook. But it's certainly something I understand now. And I thought it was a really nice piece of work that Star Trek paid attention to. I wish it'd gone on a bit longer. I think there was an intention to make it a long-term relationship. But as with all things Bashir, don't bet on it. Any woman who got anywhere near Bashir, you can pretty much guarantee you're not coming back, because he struck out more often than he did anything else. So I just like the fact that we broached the subject, and I think it was a subject that needs to be talked about even more today. And this is 25 years ago, and we're still not really sure what we make of disability. We're still not very good at giving them any money, for example, if they can't work. I think they get something in the region of $400 a month or something ridiculous, as that's how they got to live off that, and they can't work. It's not like, hey, go get a job. It's like, no, can't get a job. Obviously there are various different kinds of disability, but I'm really glad we talked about it, and it's high time it gets talked about again. I hope they talk about it in some other iteration of Star Trek, some other comfortable way of talking about something uncomfortable.
So of the many guest stars that you've worked with on DS9, did you have one that you really gelled with the most, besides Daphne, I guess, in this case? Anyone who really, really appreciated working with and really got a lot out of you on screen?
Well, Daphne for sure, but I don't think that was because she got a lot out of me on screen.
Cheeky.
I think it was, she didn't get anything. I don't want to insinuate that she got money or anything out of me. That's not the case at all. I think it would have to be Andy Robinson. I mean, he was a recurring, I know, but not a guest. But he just opened the door for Bashir, didn't he? I mean, he just goes, even though no one knew it at the time, nobody would have guessed. It was just a scene, two people talking at a Replomat, Bashir looking a little uncomfortable, but kind of giggly and giddy. That was a door that opened to a whole world of fan appreciation that has only really just been admitted to by anyone senior enough to make that admission. It opened the world to a whole gay fantasy that emerged as a result of that, which I think was so healthy. It opened the world to a lot of uncomfortable people finding comfort and solace in what that ultimately does is educate me. So as an actor, it makes me always try and keep my options open in terms of what I do on screen. And that's why you were talking sometimes about ambiguity in the characters I've been lucky enough to play. And that particular facet has been invaluable. And I don't think I could have done it I know it wouldn't have happened had not been that quirk of fate that Andy hovered around me in such a way in the Replimat and that the tiny little corner of the set with a little plant in front of me when I was young enough to be flustered by that kind of male attention, flustered and engaged at the same time, that it became the start of a trope, a thing, a whole subplot that just created vast amounts of fan fiction. And I don't care if homophobic, too bad. This was fascinating. And I think even the staunchest homophobe out there will go, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'll give you that. You can do that. That's okay. And I think that was pretty great. So that taught me a lot about, I can be this subtle. Andy can be this subtle, and they pick it up. Wow, you picked that up. Because primetime TV wasn't doing that. Primetime TV was doing, gorgeous Jason Priestley bearing his pectorals, and whoever the women on Baywatch were bearing their pectorals. And it was like, that's pretty sucky. This is a bit more interesting. And I think that's the core group of fans probably really appreciated all that stuff and probably still do.
Yeah, subtlety is a great word to use with Andrew Robinson's performances. And even just watching it now, to this day, even though I know what's going to happen next in the show, the way he does everything is just so secretive and makes you want to know so much more about him, but you don't.
Yeah.
But, I love that you guys also these days are doing your Sid City shows and you're reading fanfics together. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's great fun. We're doing it now, and it's great. We're really enjoying it. It's again fan fiction. We're just bringing it to life in a really unglamorous way. I just have a black curtain, no makeup, Andy's got no makeup. We read it because we can't learn it. We know where we can learn it in time. And it's just a fan deciding this is how the canon's. How about this? What if it was like this? And it's been, I think people who have watched it have found it quite amusing, really entertaining, especially now when it's really dark early. And but unfortunately right now, if you want to see that stuff, you have to watch it live, because we haven't negotiated to put it on with the union to put it on YouTube, which is a slightly more ambitious. We did the first lot because we just didn't know better. But we're doing this just live, and we hopefully and anybody who wants to object can object if they want to, and we give them time to do that. But I'm hoping that everybody will go, yeah, you know what? This is useful, and it's not really threatening our product. There is no harm, because everyone's so respectful of the canon. Apart from anything else, both Andy and I and Armin and Nana and everyone else really are fiercely protective of their characters, because they love them. So I don't think anything silly is going to happen.
So, Alexander, we know what you left behind, but what did you take with you? And in particular, I'm talking about the last day you were on the DS9 set. Did you take any souvenirs with you?
I took my costume. We were told not to take anything. And I was really goody two-shoes. If someone tells me not to steal anything, I'm not stealing anything. But I remember my costume person saying, you can take this. It's yours. No one else is going to wear it. No one else fits into it. You're too damn thin. So I took my costume in a plastic bag and my boots. And the only thing I have left is my boots.
And the rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history.
So, Alexander, what is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
Oh, easy. The people. all the people, not just the actors, the people I've got to know since, the fans I meet in my social club, the people who are accidental Trek fans, who, or not even fans, just people who come into my orbit because of Trek. I'm not usually a people person, but my goodness, I do like people, which is a bit of a paradox.
That's a pretty perfect answer, I'd say. And thank you for being enough of a people person today to want to talk to me, because I know you've been doing a lot of interviews today to promote Skylines. So yeah, I appreciate so much the time you've had and how generous you've been with all your stories and all your information. And again, for folks who are listening today, December 18th, you can check out Skylines. We're going to have links to where you can watch that. So make sure you check out the show notes if you want to check it out. And I do suggest that you do take a look at Skylines. So Mr. Siddig, thank you so much again. It's been wonderful. Hopefully I can see you at Star Trek Vegas 2021. Fingers crossed it happens.
Fingers crossed. So thank you. And I hope you'll enjoy Skylines. I certainly did. And it was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
That was our chat with Alexander Siddig, and we covered a lot of ground in this short time we had with him today, and I'd love to spend some more time talking with him about his career and all sorts of other things. After all, I did this entire interview without even mentioning once that his uncle is Malcolm McDowell, aka Dr. Soren from Star Trek Generations, aka the man who killed Captain Kirk. So, at the very least, there's plenty left behind for the sequel interview. And once again, don't forget to check out Skylines, which is available to see on December 18th. I'll make sure that links are updated in the show notes to reflect the different ways you can watch this fun sci-fi flick. One last note before I sign off, this episode is our final new interview of 2020, but don't worry, there's no trip to Risa planned for me. I'm not going on vacation or anything like that. Since the show has started to pick up some real steam in the past few months, in particular thanks to episodes like this with some of the leading men and women of Star Trek, I want to make sure new listeners can get easily caught up on some of the discussions we had with previous guests. So next week and the week after, I'm going to be a pair of highlight shows, starting with some of my favorite guests from Star Trek The Next Generation we've had here in 2020, and then followed by the best of Deep Space Nine guests. Then in the first week of 2021, Trek Untold returns with the first of many new interviews, and we're coming in hot with this one, so make sure you check out the compilation episodes because I just might be dropping a few hints here and there to let you know who's going to be kicking off the new year with us. So get ready, get hyped. 2021 is going to be a big year for this podcast, and it's really thanks to listeners like you who have helped it continue to grow each and every week. So I hope that in the new year we don't disappoint you, and I hope we can make 2021 even bigger, because we're going to bring you a lot of interviews with untold stories, and in fact some guests who haven't even done interviews in decades. So it's going to be a good one. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Trek Untold. Whether you're listening to this show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any audio platforms, or our YouTube channel, youtube.com Nerd News Today, please make sure you subscribe to whatever format you're listening to so you can ensure you get the new episodes of this show as soon as they come out. And that's every Thursday on audio platforms and every Sunday on YouTube for the video version. Please don't forget to check out our Teespring store to check out some of the merch we have for this show at teespring.com/stores/trekuntold. You can also support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold to become a Patreon. We've got a few different tiers that offer some different benefits that you might enjoy, so please take a look if you can. If you want to get updates on who's going to be on the newest episode of the shows, please follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at Trek Untold. That's one word, no spaces, Trek Untold. But one of the biggest things you can do to help out this show is to interact with us, whether that's leaving a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast, or leaving a comment or giving it a thumbs up on YouTube. It costs you nothing but time and helps out this show tremendously to get more attention and get more listeners to help this podcast continue to grow and expand. So until next time, I'm Matthew Kaplowitz. This has been Trek Untold. And remember, fortune favors the bold.